Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sonia Space. This is episode 34, and I'm actually really excited for this episode because this is my first video recording for Sonia Space, and I can now officially say that I am on YouTube, Sonia Space Podcast, if you want to find me on that. I do have all my previous episodes uploaded on YouTube, but I'm going to be doing more of video episodes. And not only that, I'm going to start having guests on my podcast as well. So I really wanted to incorporate the video element into my podcast series. And I promised my listeners that I would start doing that this summer. So I am really looking forward to continuing these video podcast series. For today's episode, I wanted to dive into, me being a new mom. I talked about this on episode 28. I was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety and postpartum preeclampsia. And the reason why I want to dive into talking more about postpartum anxiety and postpartum preeclampsia is because, 6 months after having baby Raya, I am still struggling with these conditions. And I know that others can relate to this as well. It is actually life altering in some way, and it can be hard. It can be very challenging. And I just want other women to know that you're not alone. My personal experience being diagnosed with these two conditions and how I was able to manage having postpartum anxiety and postpartum preeclampsia. And I hope that with sharing my insights, I hope I can help you along the way of dealing with these issues. And I just want you all to know that you're not alone. And postpartum depression is also quite prevalent and not talked about as much. I want other women to know that you're not alone in this journey, and it can be very challenging on top of everything that you have to do with taking care of a new baby. And it's such a it's such a huge transition, right? You're already going through such a huge transition in general. I mean, you have this identity shift, your body's changing physically as well, and you just feel different, mentally and emotionally as well. So I really want to go into dealing with these two conditions, and I hope that I'm able to provide you some tips and guidance on how you can probably better manage it, because I feel like I'm slowly getting to a point where I'm going back into some sort of normalcy. It took a while. I can assure you that the things that I've done have helped me quite a lot, and I hope it can help you too. Postpartum anxiety, it is just as significant as postpartum depression. And of course, it's quite normal to feel a little bit of anxiety and having new worries as a new parent. Postpartum anxiety, in actuality, is where there's constant and persistent and excessive worry about your child and yourself, and it interferes with your day-to-day life. And I can give you a few examples of what I was going through, which were indications of me having postpartum anxiety. So the things that I struggled with, I was constantly irritable. I had very bad intrusive thoughts, especially at the beginning. I think sleep deprivation also plays a part in that. So we have to make sure to take care of yourself as much as you can. Granted, it's obviously not easy, especially when you're trying to take care of a newborn baby and the demands are very high. And I was breastfeeding and pumping at that time. So it's just this excessive worriness, irritability, physical symptoms, physiological symptoms such as your heart racing and palpitations, sweatiness, dizziness. I had all of this. Now let's add another factor to this. A week after I gave birth to baby Raya, I had to rush back to the hospital because I was having blurred vision and my blood pressure was pretty elevated. And while I was in the hospital during labor, they did tell me that they're seeing signs of elevated blood pressure, but it wasn't too much of a concern. But that was something that they were monitoring at the time. And even like, while I gave birth, I was fine. But what happens a lot of times is that women end up back in the hospital after giving birth. And apparently it has to do something with the placenta and also like the hormonal imbalances that you have in the body. I really looked into it. They can't really pinpoint as to exactly why this is happening. But of course, multifactorial. I have chronic hypertension that runs in my family. And I also do want to add that I have never been diagnosed with any of these conditions or like, hypertension or anything like that prior to having baby Raya. There are certain risk factors that may have contributed to me having this. I'm also like in my mid 30s now. Like I was 34 when I'm still 34, but I was 34 when I gave birth to Raya. And having postpartum preeclampsia and being admitted to the hospital for a couple of nights, I was deep in the trenches of anxiety and depression. Like, I have never experienced so much anxiety and so much depression because already your hormones are so out of whack and they literally dip significantly after you give birth. So, on top of that, I was dealing with this postpartum preeclampsia. I wasn't at home with my baby. And imagine how disconnected I felt with the baby. And I was literally crying in the hospital. I was like, I want to go home to my baby. I'm the mother. I should be there. Like, and I had this constant fear of my child is going to lose their mother. And I think this is a very common feeling that mothers feel, but I had way too much. I had excessive worry that I think that probably contributed to me having postpartum anxiety because, and you can listen to my labor and delivery experience in episode 28, but I had a pretty traumatic labor and delivery experience. That on top of postpartum preeclampsia, and then you already have the natural worries and the baby blues and everything that's going on. It was definitely taking a toll on my body, and that lingers for not even months, but years for many women. And I really want to emphasize on this because you cannot take something like this lightly. First, you can't even like function. You're sleep deprived, you're taking care of the baby, and regardless of how much support you get, it does help. Don't get me wrong. Like I had my mom to help, my husband helped, my mother-in-law helped. You do feel very isolated. It's this mental shift that occurs that regardless of whatever, you feel very isolated because your body just went through a huge transitionary period. And on top of that, I was diagnosed with these conditions. I did not feel like myself at all, especially the first few months. I really did not feel like myself. I feel like my life had completely changed, and I'm not gonna lie, I kept feeling like I was going to die or something was going to happen to me because everything happened all at once. It was like trauma after trauma after trauma, and I was truly struggling with that. And this is something, again, to not be taken lightly. And if you're someone that's experiencing this, I totally understand where you're coming from. And if this is something that you can relate to, please message me on Instagram or leave me a comment in the YouTube link because I would really like to know your experience and like what you've done to overcome postpartum anxiety or postpartum preeclampsia or where you're at in that stage. I totally understand that this can be extremely challenging. So I would say around the 3-month mark is where I started to focus more on my physical, mental, and emotional well-being and start making some changes to overcome these challenges. Because at the end, I know that it's tough and it's not easy, but it can't happen unless you start with these baby steps. So I can tell you some of the things that I did to help me with feeling more like myself and going back to normalcy in some way. The first thing I did was I stopped breastfeeding and pumping. And for me, fed is best. I feel like a lot of mothers are really hard on themselves when it comes to feeding their baby. Essentially, you want to make sure that if you're showing up for yourself and taking care of yourself, then you can take care of your baby as well, right? You can be a better mother for them. And I got to a point around the 3 month mark where I realized that breastfeeding and pumping and supplementing, doing all of those and keeping track of everything was really taking over my life and my mental well-being. I was feeling extremely pressured. It was making me feel depressed, and I felt like I couldn't keep up to the demands of my baby because some days I'm like, I don't want to pump, I don't want to breastfeed. Hey, Jesse, my husband, can you take over? I wanted to have a consistent routine for Raya to where my husband can help as well in the middle of the night because, sleep deprivation is a real thing. And as someone who was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia, if you don't sleep enough, like enough hours, it does have an impact on your blood pressure levels. So I made that decision to stop breastfeeding and focus more on doing formula and found a way for my husband to help me more in the middle of the night in feeding Raya. So that's one of the things that I did to help me with my postpartum anxiety and postpartum preeclampsia. I also took Procardia. It's this medication that you take for postpartum preeclampsia. I only had to take it for a month, but don't get me wrong, like I still, until this day, still get elevated levels of high blood pressure. And a lot of times it is associated with anxiety, but I've just found other ways to manage it. One, I stopped breastfeeding and pumping. I started taking medicine that would help me with my mental health and physical well-being. Once I was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia and postpartum anxiety, I also started taking anxiety medications. I took the ones as needed because the SSRIs were actually, I wasn't doing well with them physically. So I opted out of the SSRIs and I focused more on the as needed anxiety medications. If I had moments where I was feeling extremely anxious, then I would just take anxiety medication as needed. So I definitely did also start incorporating medications into my life. And, sometimes therapy is not enough. Sometimes you really do have to take medication to help your physiological health. And I'm usually the type of person that I avoid medications at all costs unless I absolutely need it. The other thing that I did was I started therapy. And I think it's one of the best things that you can do for yourself because, and you don't have to actually go into the office. You can do it from home as well. Or if you want to just leave for a couple of hours and need some time for yourself while, your husband or someone else can take care of the baby, great. I started doing therapy. I started doing CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, mind you, I've done therapy before, but this type of therapy was quite different because you're really trying to get down to the negative thought patterns in your mind and figure out what triggers your anxiety. You're diving in really deep into your mind and what triggers you, and it can be very overwhelming to go through the CBT process, I just want to say, but it was very helpful that I did that, and it really did help me with my anxiety. So one of the things that my therapist told me, and this actually made me tear up, is that he was like, do you think that you're a good mom? Because I kept telling him that I have this constant anxiety of me not being a good mom, or something's going to happen to me and I can't be there for my daughter, or anytime my daughter cries, I feel like it's all my fault, like extremely intrusive thoughts. Obviously, there's more that goes into this. And he's like, do people tell you you're a good mom? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like my husband tells me that all the time and stuff. But he's like, do you tell yourself that you're a good mother? And I'm like, no. And he's like, I want you to look in the mirror and tell yourself that you're a good mother because I can assure you're a good mother, but you need to tell yourself. You need to give yourself that self affirmation. And I like broke down in tears because I have been so hard on myself. And this is not just like the first time I've been hard on myself. I feel like it's human nature, especially as women, to be really hard on ourselves. But after giving birth, you are extremely hard on yourself because like your body looks different, your lifestyle completely changes. I mean, your like life before baby and after baby, it's very different. I mean, you have to take care of a whole nother human being, and it can be quite overwhelming. And I really needed to hear that. And I think it also really helps to make sure that you're giving yourself some self affirmation words like, I'm a good mom. I am taking care of my daughter. I'm doing the best that I can. Whatever you can do, it will help you. Just saying that back to yourself out loud is quite effective. It is very, very effective. So I would highly recommend doing therapy. It does really help to talk it out with somebody. Yeah, there's like a venting aspect of it, but I wanted to go more into I can vent, but like I want solutions. Get some solutions out for me for these sessions. So I would highly recommend CBT therapy. I think it is absolutely amazing. Another thing that I did to help me with postpartum anxiety is I was, slowly going back into work. I was almost done with maternity leave. I told my husband that I would like to hire a nanny to help with Raya. And either it was that or me quitting my job. And we decided that we were going to hire a nanny part-time because, and I'm not saying like this resource is readily available for everyone because obviously there's a huge financial aspect of it that needs to be considered. I would personally like it if I had a full-time nanny, but of course I also wanted to spend time with my daughter, and we were doing whatever we can to ensure that I got the help that I needed because Jesse went back to work. I was going back to work, and I wanted to make sure that I had some external support. So I would highly suggest finding external support because I know sometimes it can be hard to ask for help, but you would be surprised that there are people out there that want to help you. There are support groups for new moms. There are nannies out there. Go and ask family members as well. It doesn't hurt, right? Like I had to ask my mom to come spend the night and help with baby Raya. Whatever you can do, please make sure that you're asking for help because if you don't ask, you will not receive. I mean, yeah, it's great. Not everybody has a great support system, and I truly understand that. But I also think that there are resources out there to help you. And one way or another, you can find those resources to help you to some degree. Maybe it can't be part-time, maybe it can be a couple days, one day a week, maybe it can be full-time, whatever works for you. Make sure you go out there and get the help that you need to help you take care of the baby. I also made some lifestyle adjustments. I started going to Orange Theory, which is like right by my house. So I started getting into the habit of working out at least 2 to 3 times a week. Then I also focused on my diet because yes, I did need to lose some weight because once you start losing weight, it helps with the postpartum preeclampsia with your blood pressure levels. I really started taking my health very seriously, and I've worked out on and off. It's not like I've never worked out. Like I've done circuit training, I've done kickboxing, I've done lifting, I've done spin classes, I've done all of that. But this is the first time in my life where I took my health a little too seriously because I got a major reality check. I started taking my workouts seriously, and I also started making sure that I was focusing on my diet. And it's not that I wanted to do something just to do it for the time being. I want to make sure that I'm making lifestyle adjustments. This is not just a temporary thing. I wanted to incorporate new habits into my life. I do want to mention that every mother's journey is unique. And another thing that we struggle with, I think especially with being women, is comparing ourselves to other women and their motherhood journey. But you need to understand that every mother has their own journey based off of the resources, support system. There's a lot of factors that can contribute to their motherhood, but I think we can all agree that motherhood is not easy. It is very, very challenging, and it can also make you feel isolated as well. Regardless of all the support system you can get, I think that feeling of isolation is quite common because of the hormonal disturbances that we're going through and the huge transitionary change that we go through in such a short period of time that makes us feel isolated. So I want to say, and I'm telling this to myself as well, is adapting to a new normal takes time and patience. I'm starting to feel better about my physical health and my mental health, but at the same time, I continue to struggle. And who knows how long I'm going to struggle with this, right? Let's say if I decide to have a second child, there's already trauma associated to my first birth that it could also lead into the second birth. There's a lot of things that women have to think about, and it can really change the trajectory of your life with being a new mom. There's a lot of changes that can take place, but it is okay, I would say, baby steps and working your way towards making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you're taking care of yourself, you're also showing up for your baby. Also, do not feel bad about taking time for yourself. I feel like a lot of times women struggle with that. Like, I still want to do the things that I enjoy. Maybe I can't do it as much. I'm going to continue to do the things that I enjoy, which includes traveling. I traveled twice already. I also went to a couple of concerts. I just found ways to manage my time around that. I'm spending time with friends. Whatever you need to do it for yourself if possible, because you also want to feel like you didn't lose yourself. And it's very, very easy to feel that way. And I know it may take some time, but it's okay to put yourself first. Take a couple days or a couple hours to do things that you enjoy. Spending time with friends is so great and it's beneficial. It takes your mind off of things and you have a support group to help you. You can find friends to vent to, or, just enjoy their company. And I think us women really struggle with, we're putting our baby first, but then we sometimes forget about ourselves. But for me, it was that because I was diagnosed with these physical conditions, I had to make sure that I was taking care of myself. It was really hard initially, but I have to remind myself, hey, Sonia, like the way that you're taking care of yourself, it could positively or negatively impact your family. And that includes my husband and my daughter. So please do not feel guilty for needing time for yourself. I hope with this episode, I made you feel like you're not alone. And I hope that my ways of managing it was helpful to you. I know that every woman's journey, every mother's journey is different, but I know this worked for me. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection, and I had to have a few conversations with my husband too, to make sure that I was taking care of myself, because me showing up super anxious to my husband and my baby was creating a negative environment in my house. And I don't want to be that person for my family. I want to make sure that I am showing up for myself. It takes baby steps, and it really takes self-reflection and inner work to figure out how you can better yourself and help yourself throughout the new motherhood process. Also, if you feel like you can relate, or if you have any questions, again, feel free to message me on Instagram or leave a comment, and I would love to hear your side of the story.